Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Susan Chekow-Lusignan, Director of Marketing and Program Development for the Friends and Foundation of the Rochester Public Library. FFRPL raises funds, presents programs, supports special projects, helps to create specialized spaces, and purchases supplemental materials and equipment for the Rochester Public Library. Welcome to our Fall Book Sandwiched In series. We have a wonderful lineup this season, and we are absolutely delighted to be back here on site for this in-person program. Thank you. Our thanks, as always, go to those who help fund programs like these through FFRPL, the dedicated FFRPL committee members who curate and organize these events, our guest speakers and artists who so graciously share their time and talents with us, the library staff who help with our setup and production, and the thousands of people who attend each year. A bit of housekeeping. We are requiring advance registration for all of the reviews this fall. Our newsletter subscribers will receive the registration link by email. We will also post the link to our website, which is ffrpl.org. And the website is also where you can sign up to receive the newsletters if you haven't already done so. And of course, you can call or email if you need any assistance with the registration process. Masking is mandatory at the library. We'll continue to limit capacity and have socially distancing seating. No food or beverages will be provided or allowed during the programs. And we will live stream each review to Facebook and also post the events with closed captioning to the RPL YouTube channel at Rochester Public Library, New York, about a week after the review. And to access the induction loop in the auditorium, set your hearing aid to the T switch. Thank you for helping to make it possible for us to present in-person events while keeping everyone safe during the ongoing pandemic. Obviously, we realize that for our patrons in the room today, the registration worked. So I'd also like to extend a special thank you to those who weren't able to get tickets and are watching our live stream or are waiting for the YouTube video to be posted. We appreciate your patience and understanding as we all try to navigate this as best as we can. FFRPL is working on many activities in support of the library, and we'd like to highlight one exciting organizational change and one exhibit. Most importantly, it is my privilege to announce that Donna Borges has joined FFRPL as our new executive director. Donna previously worked in alumni relations at Nazareth College, and she comes to FFRPL with extensive experience in administration, fundraising, community engagement, and program development. In just a few weeks, Donna has already made a big impact on our small organization, and we are so very grateful to have her on board. Please introduce yourselves to Donna after the program or via email or phone for those who are watching online. You can also meet Donna at Central Library's Art of the Book Awards Ceremony and Reception, which will be held tomorrow, Wednesday, September 29th, from 5:30 to 7 across the street in Harold Hacker Hall. The Art of the Book exhibit will be on view through November 1st, and FFRPL is a founding sponsor of the Art of the Book exhibit, and we are proud to be a part of the 10th anniversary. This year's show includes artist books, altered books, and paper sculpture from 73 artists sent from 8 countries from around the world. You can learn more about FFRPL's new executive director and Central Library's Art of the Book exhibit at ffrpl.org. Today's review is of Louise Erdrich's novel, The Night Watchman, which received the 2021 Pulitzer Prize for Fiction. The book was also named a Best Book of 2020 by the Washington Post, National Public Radio, CBS Sunday Morning, Kirkus Reviews, and the Chicago Public Library. As Kirkus Reviews notes, in this kaleidoscopic story, the efforts of Native Americans to save their lands from being taken away by the US government in the early 1950s come intimately, vividly to life, a knowing, loving evocation of people trying to survive with their personalities and traditions intact. Our presenter today is Virginia Fifield, Mohawk from Oksawasani Reservation, an associate of the Sisters of Mercy, a 50-year veteran of social justice activism, member of many anti-racism organizations, and an activist for ecological justice. Please join me in welcoming Virginia Fifield to our podium.
Good afternoon. First of all, it's an honor to be here. I was just speaking to somebody and I said, it's quite a difference within the last few years that Native American voices are being heard. I love Louise Erdrich's writing period, because although most of her books are fiction, there is a sprinkling and there is a lot of history and fact within her writing. I just want to read, I'm going to preface this too by saying this is a book by a Native American woman, and I'm going to review it through Native American eyes. First, I'd like to read the preface here. On August 1st, 1953, the United States Congress announced House Concurrent Resolution 108, a bill to abrogate nation-to-nation treaties, which had been made with American Indian nations for as long as the grass grows and the rivers flow. The announcement called for the eventual termination of all tribes and the immediate termination of 5 tribes, including the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. My grandfather, Patrick, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name, fought against termination as tribal chairman while working as a night watchman. He hardly slept, like my character, Thomas. This book is fiction, but all the same, I have tried to be faithful to my grandfather's extraordinary life. Any failures are my own. Other than Thomas and the Turtle Mountain jewel-bearing plant, the only other major character who resembles anyone alive or dead is Senator Arthur V. Watkins, relentless pursuer of native disposition and a man who interrogated my grandfather. Patrice, is completely fictional. Now, this would give you the impression that the only time that they tried to terminate these treaties is in the 50s. That's not true. Just in President Trump's, President Trump, by the wave of a pen, eliminated the Wampanoags. We recognize them, but they are not federally recognized now, which means they get absolutely no benefit from the government. So, as I said, Louise Erdrich, she sprinkles, I think what she does is takes her characters as many, many people she knows and puts them into one character. But throughout this book, I find absolute things that when I read them, I say, oh yeah, that's how I feel, but I never could express or put into words what I feel. And she does a wonderful job in all of her books. For example, her reference about time, as seen through Native eyes, starts on page 20 with, because time did not exist at her house, or rather, it was the keeping of time, as in school or work time, that did not exist. Then on page 193, she has, You cannot feel time grind against you. There is nothing but everything, not the seconds, minutes, hours, days, years. Yet this substantialist substance, this bending and shaping, this warping, this is the way we understand time. So she might introduce an idea at first, and then throughout the book she builds on that idea, so that I think a lot of people who read Louise Erdrich and are not Native really kind of sometimes say, what? Really don't understand the concept that she's talking about. Another example of how she weaves a theme through this book is the boarding schools. Now, I don't know whether anybody has been keeping up with the news out of Canada and the boarding schools. They make it sound like, you know how we think of boarding schools as a privilege to go? This was not. They took children by force, sent them miles and miles away from their families, cut their hair, put them in uniforms, and told them that everything that they were was evil. My father happened to be a product of Carlisle boarding school. So in this book, she talks about Erdrich, and Erdrich is dead. But in the beginning, she makes reference to something terrible has happened to Erdrich in the boarding school. And throughout the book, she builds the story, and it concludes on page 440, when she reveals that Erdrich is a wandering spirit who died a horrible death, and speaks of other spirits who were lynched from street lamps or died in the throes of alcoholic stupor. He speaks of the ghost dance and wanders through the Smithsonian Museum, where he encounters Indian ghosts stuck to their bones or their scalp locks or pieces of skin, ghost dance shirts, buzzing shields, gurgling baby moccasins, and sacred scrolls choked with spirits. Now, that might seem like an innocuous kind of a statement, but for Native Americans, we are the only people whose bones are still in museums. We are a display. And, I mean, she doesn't get into the emotions this, brings up, but a lot of what she says in her books bring up a lot of pain and hurt in Native Americans. At the beginning of the book, she references the character of Vera and how she took part in the relocation program that the government offered. Now, most of us would see this relocation as an opportunity, but she writes on page 63, let me get to page 63, here is how the government advertised this relocation. Behind the poster was taped to the wall, "Come to Minneapolis, a chance of your lifetime, good jobs in retail trade, manufacturing, government, federal, state, local, and exciting community life. Convenience stores, beautiful Minnesota, 10,000 lakes, a zoo, museum, drives, picnic areas, parks, amusements, movie theaters, happy homes, beautiful homes, many churches, exciting community life, and convenience stores." The reality is most of the people who relocated to cities were dumped in the city. Now, coming off a reservation and being dumped in a city, you have no clue of what's going on. And many natives were enticed to take part in these relocations. Then as the story progresses, the author introduces you to what really happened during that relocation. Squalid housing, human trafficking, drugs, prostitution, and exploitation. And she says in here, a lot of people returned to the reservation within a month, but many you never heard from again. So you can imagine the families wondering, what happened to the person. The character of the night watchman, Thomas, is developed throughout the book. It begins with a description of a simple man doing a tedious, simple job of being a night watchman. But as the story develops, we see just how complex a person Thomas really is. What he's willing to sacrifice for his family and his tribe. He is charged with facing down the United States government in Washington, D.C., with just a handful of supporters. He is responsible for stopping the elimination, it isn't just, we're not going to honor the treaties. They want to exterminate these people. So the elimination of his entire community. To do this, he decides that he's got to get to know and understand the enemy. He's cunning, he's insightful, and at times manipulative, but always, always intelligent. He figures out how to do this. And he convinces people who are more reluctant to go to Washington, D.C. and confront senators and congressmen. With the character of Millie, Louise Erdrich introduces the educated native. She makes us understand that education can be used as a weapon to fight against extermination and to, for a long time, natives, the elders, didn't really understand people leaving the reservation to go to college. However, through the years, they began to understand that the education that we get in college can be brought back to the nation, to the tribe, to use to their benefit. So now it's less of a taboo for people to leave the reservation and to go to school, because most people that do understand that you need to bring that back to the people. She speaks eloquently about the spirituality without hitting you over the head with it. In all her books, she tries to make people understand the different way Native people see and move through the world. In The Night Watchman, she has the character of Patrice, being a person of introspection. For example, on page 44, here we go, she speaks about Patrice speaks about the expanse of God. And let's see, is this 44? She says, Patrice had come to think that humans treated the concept of God or the Holy Ghost in a childish way. She was pretty sure that the rules and trappings of ritual had nothing to do with God, that they were the ways for people to imagine they were doing things right in order to escape from punishment or harm, like children. She had felt the movement of something vaster, impersonal, yet personal, in her life. She thought that maybe people in contact with the nameless greatness had a way of catching at the edges, a way of being pulled along, or even entering into this beyond experience. And that's really profound. And I think a lot of natives understand the vastness of it all, the majesty of it all. There are so many poignant images in this book. And one that really stuck out to me is on page 91, where she talks about, well, let me get it, 91. When she talks about the bill, and it says, be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that the purpose of this act, this 108, is to provide for the termination of federal supervision over the trust and restricted property of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa in North Dakota, South Dakota, and Montana, for the disposition of federally owned property acquired or within for the administration of the affairs of such Indians, for the intensification of orderly program of facilitating the relocation and placement of such Indians in the self-supporting economy, to end the federal services and supervision with respect to such Indians may be discontinued as no longer necessary, and for the termination of the federal services furnished to such Indians because of their status as Indians. It sounds really good, a lot of big flowery words. What it means is extermination. We, like very similar to the relocation hype, it all sounds very good, and, we're going to make them self-sufficient, when there's no way to make them self-sufficient. And what it means is we no longer want the responsibility of what we have done to you, and we no longer want the responsibility of continuing to aid you. And this is happens over and over and over again. It's still happening. Standing Rock is a good example. That was a pipeline that was supposed to go through Bismarck, and Bismarck happens to be 90% white. They did not want the pipeline, so they said, okay, we'll do it on through Indian land, without asking, without, as I said, this is a lot of what's in her books actually are things that happen, things that are happening. There is not a native alive who has not felt, on page 55, where he talks about when he read this, Thomas read this, to most of their neighbors, Indians were people who suffered and hid away in shabby dwellings or roamed the street in flagrant drunkenness and shame, except the good ones. There are always good Indians that someone knew, but they're not the people who champion. So it's, we are the Indian problem, and we remain the Indian problem. Gerald is another character in this book who, he's a seer. We understand what the seer is. To explain it, Vera's parents, or mother, had called this Gerald to her house to find out what happened to Vera in Minneapolis, because nobody has heard from her. Well, Gerald takes a flight, and it's not a flight of imagination or anything. He actually takes a flight to Minneapolis, and he sees Vera. And he reports back to the mother that Vera has had a child, and is still alive, but beyond that, he can't tell her anything. So on reservations, there really are people who do this. I know it sounds very superstitious and spooky, but it really is not. It's amazing what people can do on the reservation. We have a woman up in Akwesasne who can come into a room and just meet people for the first time who are not living on the reservation but are native. And she'll walk around and just look at your face and she'll say, "You're a Hill, you're a Scott, you're a," and she's right. So there's something, I don't know what it is. Like I said, I'm sure to most people it sounds superstitious. The other thing that she talks frequently about is intelligence. What is intelligence? Is it book learning? Is it, I can recite dates and times and history, and or is it like Patrice's mother, who knows things about life, about the world, that isn't in books? There's a wisdom there that elders hold that I can't explain it. It's just, they're brilliant. They are. I'll give you a really good example. I was talking to a class out in one of the schools in Canandaigua yesterday, and one of the things I said, the wisdom. Now, thousands and thousands of years ago, the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois, we learned how to plant corn, beans, and squash. Now, corn, beans, and squash are, you can live on just corn, beans, and squash. They're sustainable, okay? Now, and this is handed down through generations and generations, that we plant this on a mound. We don't plant it like regular planting. It's on a mound. And what the corn takes out of the soil, the beans put in. What the beans take out of the soil, the squash puts in. As the corn grows and the stalk goes up, the beans climb it, and the squash leaves will shade the plant so that you don't need to water it constantly. Now, how did they figure that out? It's like I have no clue. Another example is we call North America Turtle Island. Now, if you look at a map of North America, it looks like a turtle. Now, how did they know that? It's like sometimes I'm just in awe of knowledge. In the Night Watchman, she lays out Native experience with the Mormon Church. Now, the Mormon Church, it's written in the Book of Mormon that they consider Native Americans to be Lamanites. And it's one of the four ancient people described as having settled in ancient America. That's according to the Book of Mormon. Okay, and one of the things that they say that's written is the reference to the Lamanites come from the biblical book of Samuel, where it says that the Lamanites were a people whom the Lord hated. And also, I'm not sure whether anybody knows, but the Mormons were actually responsible for the Sand Creek Massacre, and they killed off hundreds of people. Now, here is the Mormons she writes on page 186, the Mormons had tried their best to murder all Indians in their path across the country, but in the end did not quite succeed. Arthur V. Watkins, who is a senator who introduced this bill to exterminate the natives, decided to use the power of his office to finish what the prophet had started. He didn't even have to get his hands bloody. And she describes how Thomas views Arthur V. Watkins. And she says is, Arthur V. Watkins is not all bad, but they're people who honestly think they're right. So that, and they have, she writes in here, they have an aggressive air of cleanliness and godliness. So that kind of gives you the, the image of arrogance. And I think one of the most dangerous things we can encounter, at least for me, working with anti-racism, is well-meaning liberals who think they're right. They know, and I always use this reference as, okay, some people have seen Dances with Wolves maybe 3 times, so they know all about you, And this is, she does emphasize this. She talks about when they go to Washington and Thomas, the strain of everything, Thomas has a stroke before he gets home. And he ends up in the hospital. However, what she does emphasizes that Thomas doesn't die. He does go back to the reservation. And the Chippewa, this turtle band of Chippewa, were not exterminated, but there were other tribes who were. And I think I talked about the education, the character of Millie. It has a knowledge, but Patrice's mother, as I said, is someone who has a natural knowledge, and Thomas's wife, Rose, is a woman who takes in all stray children. Anybody is welcome. So they feed and they house and they nurture children who families aren't able to care for them. And that still goes on reservations. In the back here, in the book too, I think might seem like a superstition or it might seem otherworldly, is when Thomas has a vision. Now, a vision is different than a dream. A dream is a dream, but a vision, it's almost like an out-of-body experience. And let me see if I can find where the vision is. Where Thomas goes out in the freezing cold and because he hears a drum and can't figure out where the drum is coming from. He goes out in the freezing cold and he has a vision of beings. He calls them ethereal beings. And they give him a song. And that's one of the precepts is everybody has a song. You have to discover it. And Thomas's vision is what the song that he is given by these ethereal beings is what carries him through, gives him strength. So, like I said, there are many things in Louise Erdrich's books that, I think non-natives, when they read it, say that it is superstition or it is, beyond understanding. But when natives read it, we understand it. And this book particularly, I think, really hits on just about everything natives feel but have not been able to articulate. Louis is one character who has been so beaten down by society that he has absolutely no confidence. But Thomas gives him the opportunity. He lifts Louis up and says what he wants Louis to do is to go out onto the reservation and into town and go to the VA and any place he can go to get signatures on a petition that he can bring to Washington. And Louis is, at first, was like, I can't do, no way I can do that. But the elders have a way of convincing you can do just about anything. They do lift each other up. What is his name? The young man that Patrice, or it tries to court Patrice, I'm trying to figure out what his name is. I forget what his name is. But he's a traditional gentleman, and he helps when Patrice goes to Minneapolis to find Vera. She gets herself involved in some dubious actions only because of naivete and money. She's offered quite a bit of money. However, the gentleman who hires her is leading her into human trafficking. And when Patrice goes to find Vera, she enters a room where there are dog collars and chained to the wall. And then when Patrice really looks at it, they're not regular dog collars. They're for human beings. And this is where Patrice understands this is the mess that Vera has gotten herself into. But it is this young man who comes to Patrice's rescue. And they end up taking Vera's baby. And the baby wants nothing to do with Patrice. But the young man, I wish I could find his name, but Moon Mountain, I think his name is. What? Yes. So he ends up caring for the baby. And he brings the baby home. And Patrice, during this time, is having dreams, and so is her mother, having dreams of Vera and Vera coming home. And Vera actually gets, the human traffickers actually throw her out onto the docks in the middle of the night. And Vera remembers. Now, she's in a drugged state. She's been abused and misused, but she remembers the road home. And that, to me, is a metaphor, too, the road home. So many natives are lost, and then they finally find their way home. And when I say home, I don't mean a physical place. They find their way back to the community. And Vera does that. She finds her way home and actually is all right in the end. But, it's the young man has made a cradle board for the baby. He's traditional. And he ends up with not Patrice, but Vera. And like I said, so many poignant things in this book that really touched me. I don't know, has anybody read the book? Okay, a few. I really highly recommend it. And that's about what I have to say about the book. And I hope people do pick it up.